Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 75 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman, and grateful to be your host today. Well, today I'm excited to share a really interesting conversation I had with a new friend of mine, Amy Gelatt. Amy currently lives in Hays, Kansas, and if you were at the USMB convention last summer, you might remember that Amy briefly shared part of her story in one of the sessions there at convention, but honestly, her story is much bigger and deeper than what she shared, and we talk about it today. We didn't even get to all of it today. It's a big, long, pretty amazing story of a bunch of different miracles, like miracle after miracle that led Amy to where she is today. She was born in India, and she comes from a very interesting tribal background that I think you'll really enjoy learning more about. And again, it's just kind of one twist after another that ended up bringing her here, and how her ministry in Hays is continuing with her husband. And talking and listening to Amy, you can just feel the zeal that she has for her faith and her desire to share her faith with those around her. And it honestly is just one of those just amazing stories that I think you're going to really enjoy hearing a little bit more detail about. So I hope her story encourages and inspires you as much as it did for me. So let's get right to it. Let's just take a quick break to hear from a sponsor. Then we'll get to a really amazing story of faith, evangelism, perseverance, and really just God's hand of blessing in Amy's life. So let's get right to my conversation with Amy Gelatt.
USMB is pleased to offer 3 free newsletters to our Mennonite Brethren family. Snapshot comes from the desk of USMB National Director Don Morris and contains news and prayer requests. The Field is your source for church planting stories and updates from church planting mobilizer Brian Harris. And C-Link is informative with news from the Christian Leader magazine pertaining to Mennonite Brethren and inter-Mennonite agencies. Sign up for one or more of USMB's free newsletters today at www.usmb.org/newsletters and stay in the know on all the latest news and prayer requests.
All right, my friends. Well, today I have the honor of introducing you to someone that I'm really excited to dive into their story. Today we're talking to Amy Gelatt. She's joining us from Hays. Her and her husband, Josh, lead at North Oak Community Church in Hays, Kansas. And Amy, I'm just so honored to be with you. You shared your story briefly at convention last year. We've chatted just a little bit. You had an article in Christian Leader, and you have a story that's just really incredible. So today we're just going to hear testimony, hear your story, and I'm so excited. So Amy, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Well, it's great to have you. And so you told me that even a lot of your closest friends and family call you Amy. I'm going to try really hard because you have a different birth name, okay? And us Americans are not very smart. So we have some people may struggle with your name. I'm going to give it a shot, okay? You tell me how well I do, and you can correct me, okay? So Vanlalhmachhuani. Let me try again. Vanlalhmachhuani.
Pretty close. It's
okay.
Vanlalhmachhuani. But, it comes with all the tone intonation that you can't know if you don't speak the language. So you did pretty good.
Okay, well, I guess I'll take pretty good. If it's okay with you today, I might call you Amy just so I don't butcher it every single time. But okay. Well, Amy, you have like I said, just an amazing story. You were born in India, and you have kind of a pretty amazing story about how you got to where you are today. So we'll spend most of our time just hearing about your story. So why don't you tell us about India, where you were born, Northeast India? Tell us about your family. What's the culture like there? Why don't you just start with what was life in India like for you?
So I am a second-generation Christian, and my dad joined the Indian Army. So he actually left our home state before I was even born. So I was born in a neighboring state, so I was not born in my home state. But culturally, it's a tribal culture that sits around the older generation, and we listen to folk tales and folk stories a lot. So a lot of my information, which I found out was a little bit broken up in my head, was handed down stories because my grandfather on my mom's side was one of the first evangelists after Christianity came to our home state. So I knew a lot of it handed down, but then I had to go back and look at the details of how it actually came, the gospel actually came. This is extremely important to us because it really defined the whole community, defines our faith because of the way we live it out, of the way the expectation, the norms. We kind of stick out even as we live and travel in the neighboring state Northeast India has like 7 sister states. It constituted of about 7 states there with completely different languages, completely different culture and food and dress and also it is very interesting in terms of our culture being extremely unique. And I think one of the reasons it's unique is the gospel. The gospel changes everything. I think I've heard it said even in the Elite Pods, the gospel changes everything. So, and I think it truly does. My folks, my people were from the land of Mizoram. Mizoram just means the land of Mizos, and Zo is pretty much mountainous, and it is in the ending range of the Himalayas. So it is very, very hilly, very much almost tropical still because there's lots of trees, very impenetrable. But the people, the tribe, a little over 100 years ago, were still very much headhunting tribe. You know, they were very wild. The religion was animistic in nature, where you worship the spirits, very, very aware of the spirit world, but not knowing God. And people, the tribal leaders were very protective of their own tribe. So in order to secure safety and security, even from animals and people, killing became such a sport for the men. And a good warrior is always celebrated. And especially if the danger comes in with animals, wild animals or men, if they bring in the head home of the enemy, it was celebrated. It was just of that culture where we were almost known to be like a headhunting tribe. Because of that, the story is key only because of the protective nature of the borders when the British, India was subjugated by the British. So when they came and make tea gardens, they encroached the land where they were hunting for food and for different things. And this is also tied with the religion. The men has to kill certain wild animals. And once they killed wild animals, they come home. It secured them paradise. If you are a brave warrior, you get to go to paradise someday. Okay. So when the British, the tea gardens came too close, they decided that they're going to go raid it. And this was at the border. It's not even in our state, but it's in the bordering state. And they went one night and killed Captain Winchester. He was one of the men in there, and they kidnapped his daughter, Mary Winchester. And this was in 1871, somewhere around that time. Okay. And when we took him, they thought nobody saw him. But then I guess one of the aides, the helpers saw him. So the British came in a storm and subjugated the land and closed the borders and really took control of it and said, you cannot do this. But that also meant, how are we going to get to heaven then? Right? So it was tied with the religion. So it got really difficult. But then when this story reached England, especially in Wales, a certain Christian millionaire, his name was Robert Arthington, when he read about the attack, he then was moved to compassion and decided that there is a headhunting tribe in the corner of India and that we needed to go send missionaries to. So he ended up sending J.H. Lorraine and F.W. Selvage. So these two men came and they tried. It took a while because it was very wild place. We have no written language. And so they came and learned the language and they traversed through the land on foot. So it took them weeks to get there, but to make friendship with these tribe was hard. And it took them years until I think it was 1905 when they had their first convert finally. But then right around that time, 1902 to 1915 was the time of the Welsh revival. And that actually swept the missionaries, even in Asia. And so some of our people, when they started hearing the news, these first converts were doing their very best. And so they actually tried to go expose themselves to this missionary meetings in the neighboring state. Nothing really happened. A lot of prayers happened. But then on the way home, it started catching fire. And in about 10, 15 years, the whole state pretty much got the gospel.
Wow.
Now, the transformation was so stark and so different that we had the privilege of getting just literacy came right away because these missionaries were so kind. They taught us the hymns, they translated the words. So I grew up actually knowing lots of hymns in my language, and it was very easy. I look at the words in English and I can just sing along. I know many hymns because of these missionaries.
Oh, that's amazing.
And because of their commitment, in like 30 years, we got our first New Testament. And
Wow.
I think it was in the 50s, we got our whole Bible, which was very fast for a tribal
Yeah.
group.
Very
And
cool.
Word of God was key factor. And at one point, it is unfortunately not that way anymore. But at one point, I mean, when I was growing up, there were no beggars on the street. People took care of each other and were just living out the Christian life and just wanted to share. When somebody gets saved, they just want to be a missionary. That's the world I grew in.
Wow.
So I wanted to be a missionary even as a young gal. That was something at 5th grade. I'm like, that's what I want to do. So it was very natural to do that. And so the gospel spread like wildfire. At one point, I think it might still be close. We might be the close top 3 still in literacy rate.
Oh, really?
I think
Wow.
that the gospel just does wonders on that. So
Huh.
many good, brilliant people there loving the Lord. But as the story goes, I think it was in the 80s that 87, 88, we got our first television.
Okay.
And I watched the moral decline within 10 years.
Oh,
So
really? Wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
very.
Isn't that okay? That's interesting because on one hand, it's kind of amazing how fast the culture turned around to Christianity, right? It sounds like just a handful of men or a handful of families or whatever had a pretty astounding influence on the culture. But then it's interesting that you say the opposite is also true, that as soon as TV came, things kind of corroded, right?
Yeah.
Kind of amazing. Just one little thing here, one little thing there can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
So how did you
Yeah.
notice culture changing?
I definitely know because I saw the TV came around 87, 88, and then I came in 91 to go to Bible school.
Okay. Uh-huh.
God opened the doors for me. But when I went back home to visit my folks in 93, 94, they were beginning, I mean, like divorce was hardly even mentioned. There was
Oh,
some
really?
divorces, but hardly ever mentioned.
Mhm.
And drugs, you don't hear much of any of that.
Yeah.
But when I went back, the code word for like when they start talking about people having affairs, their code word was using the soap opera terms like, oh, they're playing Santa Barbara. If they're saying they're playing
Oh,
Santa Barbara, that means they're having an affair. So they
interesting.
were using soap opera code words when
Wow.
people were having affairs. So I'm telling, and they were watching Baywatch. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily saying we can't blame what's out there. I mean,
Sure.
we have the sin nature is within us and it
Mhm.
provoked, but it's quickly fed. It's quickly, yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. That's wow. Well,
Yeah.
you kind of we'll kind of keep going here because you kind of breezed over something, but you came to America, and I know that at least from what I've heard and what I've read, that is, your family probably couldn't really afford that on their own. So you getting to America is kind of a miracle in itself, right? Can you tell us
Oh,
how did that happen? How did you end up in Michigan?
so when I was in 5th grade was when I decided I want to be a missionary. And my dad and I used to read what is now Voice of the Martyrs. It used to be
Uh-huh.
called Portrait for Christ at that time.
Okay.
And my dad only up to 8th grade. So he would long for me to read the English translation of it. He wanted to make sure that we go to an English medium school so that we have a further reach. Like I said, both my parents on my mom's side, my grandfather on my mom's side was the first evangelist when they got saved way back in the early 1900s. On my dad's side, when the gospel started coming and my grandparents on my dad's side were trying to witness, many times they were actually driven out of the villages. And so they almost lived like a nomadic life. So they just
Okay.
went through. So, but it instilled in my dad's heart this need for missions really big.
Mhm.
But like when my dad was only 9 years old, the yellow fever that swept that big pandemic that happened a long time ago swept that land too. And there was no medical help. So on my dad's side, both parents contracted the disease. So they actually had to go off into the woods to die. That was the only way to preserve,
Oh,
um,
wow. Oh,
you
my
know,
goodness.
the town. So
Yeah.
my dad remembers them going into the woods and never seeing them again.
Oh, that's
So,
heartbreaking.
yeah. So that was the parents that raised me. They were just sold out for the kingdom. And so my dad could not sit with anybody 5 minutes without sharing the gospel. That was just what I witnessed him do all my life.
Okay.
Cobblers come and fixes our shoes, or, a bus ride to town. He's always witnessing.
Hmm.
And so I had this fire inside of me. And because I was reading Richard Wurmbrand's story, my goal was, I want to go to Russia. I want to die a martyr. That was a big thing to me.
Really?
Because that was something that I read so much about, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed so much about the passion these people had sold out for the kingdom.
Hmm.
And so I said, I want to be a medical doctor, and I'm going to go to Russia by myself and die a single missionary. That was my thought. And
Wow. You
so
might be the
trying
only one who had that exact dream. That's amazing.
But then when I was in high school, we have this thing called high school leaving certificate. It's like a big board exam that determines which direction you're going to go to college.
Okay.
And when we did that, I found out that, okay, all through the high school, I was studying hard. I was not the smartest person in the classroom, but then I worked hard to get at least to the top 10 with the goal that I'm going to go to med school.
Hmm.
But then when I hit my board exam, to the surprise of me, my family, and my teachers, not only did I not get into the top 10, I was like I passed in what would be equivalent to a C grade. And I had a grace mark on math, which means no way was I going to be a doctor. And
Okay.
I remember crying for 5 hours straight, thinking that the Lord did not want to use me.
Hmm.
And I said, Lord, since 5th grade, I thought you and I had this thought about doing this together. And
Yeah.
if I'm not a doctor, and if you can't use me for your kingdom, then why should I even live? I was just so much in despair. And that's where he gave me my life verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, where Paul talked about they were in so much turmoil. Their turmoil was different, but almost despairing for life. But then he concluded in 2 Corinthians, when he said, and he died for all, that those who live may no longer live for themselves, but for him, for who their sake died and was raised. That was the verse that God then gave me. And he said, I want you to live for me, not what you think you should do for me, but I want you to live for me.
Yeah,
and that
right.
looked completely different than what you think.
Mhm.
So then I said, okay. So I went to an arts college, and I went and took English major.
And this is still in India?
This is still in India. So I went to college, very unhappy, but always keeping my antenna up on what I was going to do next. And then a travel professor came. He had just gotten his degree, his Bible degree, from America. And then it just hit me. I said, I want to go to America. I want to go to America and go study the Bible there. Because at that time, I had a youth leader who was just giving me books after books to read. I was reading Tozer and Zondervan books and different authors that Oswald Chambers. I was just reading all these people and devouring it and enjoying it. And every time I look at it, it would say printed in Erdman's, Grand Rapids, or Baker Bookhouse, Grand. And I thought one day, I remember I would save all my bus fare and taxi fare and my allowances just to secure a good book. And I would walk instead of taking rides. And then I would buy a book. And one time I remember standing, I'm like, this is again printed in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I looked up to the heavens. I said, Lord, it must be wonderful to live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I didn't even know where this place was.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And I just prayed. And so when the traveling professor came, I thought maybe I could go to America. And I remember my best friend saying, don't dream so hard again, because when your dreams shatter, you get so sad.
Oh,
So
yeah.
because I had zero connection to America, and how in the world am I going to come here from where I was? So
Yes.
she was all worried about me. And I said, well, he's got the whole world in his hands. If he wants me to go, I will go, I said.
Yes.
And so just at that time, I then started looking into going to Bible school through our synod, which was the Presbyterian Synod. And I don't blame them, but at that time, they were only supporting men who they can ordain as pastors.
Okay.
So the gal wanting to study was just like, nah, you'd make a great pastor's wife, they would say. And I got so mad that I said, I will never marry a pastor. So here we are.
There you go.
But anyway, so right at that one time, the last time, I was so discouraged when they rejected my application. I went home and my dad was waiting for me at the gate, and he's like, "Hey, I got a telegram. I need you to answer." And I said, "Oh," and he's like, "Well, this guy I used to witness to when I was in Central India during my service time. He was a Muslim kid, and I shared him the gospel. I gave him a New Testament, and he didn't get saved at that time, but I guess he went on to read scriptures and the Lord used it. And now he's in America and he wants to come and see me. And I want you to write a telegram back to tell him that he can come visit us."
Okay.
So then, okay. So I went and sent the telegram, and that man was on his way to the airport. If that telegram did not reach by seconds, this connection would never happen.
Wow.
On the way out the door, the gentleman gave him the telegram and said, "Oh, so then I can come." So he came and visit.
Wow.
And long story short, he was my connection then to come here.
Okay.
And we were just talking about dreams and missions, and he was at that time also serving. So he challenged me, if I want to go to Bible school, I should come to the States. I'm like, "Oh, there you are." So that was God telling me, "I'm opening doors for you." But then it took 3 years until I would come, because of passports and visa from my corner of the world was also very tough. Yeah. And lots of disappointments, lots of people mocking me, saying, "Oh, now that it looked like I was going to go to America," people were just like, looking up to me. And then they were like, and then I couldn't go. And so then I was embarrassed. And then I hear whispers, and there's that waiting period. Waiting period always seems very long. Mm-hmm. And in the waiting period, actually, God had a different plan. I had now graduated from college with my English degree, and my uncle wanted to start a mission school in one of the states in Northeast, where Christianity was pretty much banned. And he wanted to open a Christian school. And so he's like, "Do you want to come and work?" I'm like, "Well, God is not opening my doors to America anyway, so why not?" So I went and was part of the founding faculty for an elementary school. Very cool. And that's another thing. I never, ever wanted to be a teacher. Even as a child, when we would play house, I was always a student. And the irony of Paul saying, "I die daily," that has become in. And my sister at one point had also told me, "Hey, you keep saying you want to die a martyr. Just want you to think about the fact that it's easier to die for Christ and live for Christ. Dying, you put a head on a chopping block and you're gone.
Yeah.
But you live daily, alive, but you die to yourself. Mm-hmm. That's a harder martyrdom than you think."
Yeah.
And I was so convicted by that. God, so true. Mm-hmm. So this dying to self has become one of my mantra, which is hard. Anyway, so I went to the school and I was there for 1 year and I started loving it. I didn't realize how much I love teaching little kids. And so then I get this other letter saying, "Okay, your visa, your passport is here. You are ready. The school has accepted you." And so then I get this letter, and the school was in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
The land of flowing milk and honey with nothing but Christian publishing, right?
But the irony and he could have picked he lived in California, this gentleman.
Okay.
He could have picked any Bible school in America. And I don't know how he got to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I knew that day that I was going to come. even though things got really grim and difficult, that
Yeah.
was God telling me that I see you. I see
Yeah.
you and I have a plan for you. So anyway, financially, my dad was an ex-military guy. We did not have much money. And in order to come here it was hard because passport itself, I have to go to a bigger city to do that. And visa, I have to go to Kolkata, which was the nearest embassy. So
Okay.
that was even further. But
Yeah.
as doing my paperwork, then I realized in order to be fully accepted, I also have to pass my TOEFL, which is Test of English as Foreign Language.
Okay.
And that test had to be done in New Delhi, which is the India's capital, which is even further away.
Wow.
For all these travels, I'm like, we don't have that kind of money. And I can't waste all our time here. But I could tell you the miracles where money just increased overnight in my purses and God just provided one way or the other.
Wow.
And so I was able to secure all my travels. And I was denied visa 2 times. And the third time there was an Indian holiday. So I traveled for no reason, wasted all that money in my mind. But I think it's just God showing off saying, I can take care of you. So
Yeah.
anyway, but then in between all of that time when I was getting ready to come, there's one little thing I would like to tell you with my dad was when I went to the mission field to go be a teacher. At the bus stop, I was mere 21, 22. And when he stopped at the bus stop, he said, you're going to a land where the bus doesn't even get all the way there. You have to take rickshaws to get to that place. It's very remote. And he said, I probably will not, if you die there, I probably will not bring your body home. He said, I will see you in heaven. Wherever you fall, a church will be planted and I will see you in heaven.
Oh, wow.
That was the goodbye, farewell words from my dad.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
My parents never gave that much importance to life on earth. They were they live in the light of eternity. They see this as a temporary time to serve God the best you can.
Yeah.
And so it was scary because when we did go, they were threatening to burn our school down. They were trying not to open it and, all those details. There's no time for all that now. But anyway, so that piece of information was important because when I decided that I'm coming to the States, my dad said, oh, I'm ready. My youngest is out of the house. I can go serve now. And so he actually went and did mission work. But he came home to say goodbye to me, to say, give his farewell. But that day, I was not home because I was going and asking my in-laws and my families and my aunts and uncles for money to come here. And I went back to our home state. And because we settled in a neighboring state to go to the good schools and stuff. Anyway, so when I was gone, my dad had come home and had passed away. So I didn't even get to see him say goodbye to me. And I already had a ticket to go to Calcutta to get my visa. And if I got my visa, I was going to keep going to America. So my dad died on February 1st and my ticket was for February 15th.
Okay. Wow.
My mom said nothing. All that time, we do a lot of grieving. People come to our home. We cry. We do a lot of grieving together. We sing songs, read scriptures. And mom said nothing. But on the 15th morning, I remember giving my mom a hug. I said, Mom, thank you for not stopping me because it's just one chance. And it's not like, oh, let's just reschedule. It's not that easy at that time.
Right.
So, and my mom said, well, this is what your dad would have wanted. And we've just want you to serve the Lord. So you go with blessing. So I went, but then my visa was denied. So then God gave me back to her and I lived with her for a whole year. And then after that whole year, she was ready. When I was trying to apply for my visa again, she said, okay. I said, Mom, if I don't get my visa, is it okay if I go back to that school and continue to serve? And she said, yep, I'm good. God gave you to me for one more year. I'm good. You go. So, but that was the time I did get my visa and then I came. So, yeah. And that too, by this time I have depleted the family money because I've been trying to come so many times and all the travel. And there was a civil unrest at that time. And on the ticket, my friend and I, who told me not to dream so big, was with me the day we went and checked out the ticket to come here. And she said, because there was curfew and the curfew ended at 5 o'clock. And the lady at the booth said, you have to make your decision by 12 o'clock tomorrow. And I said, there's no way. I don't have money to buy this ticket to go by 12 tomorrow. And curfew is at 5. We can't even go around asking people at church for help.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend looked at me and she said, you are not going to deprive me of a miracle anymore. He said, I have seen what God has done and you will have your money. I know you will, she said, and I want to see what God is doing. And so she looked at the lady at the booth and said, we will be here by noon tomorrow with the money. And I just looked at her. I'm like, with what money? And she said, I'm sure God will do something about it. So we went home. The bus ride alone was an hour home. And I had all of 2-hour window that evening. But when we got to our bus stop near our little block, my friend who had come home from Oman, who had married off some rich man, she was at the bus stop and she said, oh, I'm so glad I saw you. My husband felt terrible that he couldn't help you with anything last time we saw each other. And he told me to make sure that I give you some money this time I come home. And she gave me more than half of what I needed.
Wow.
On the spot. And so my friend said, see, I told you.
Wow.
He said, you got 3 more hours tomorrow and God will give it to you. And so the next morning, we went to this business family in the town that was also an elder. And my mom said, can we just borrow it? We'll pay you back once after she's gone. And the gentleman said, oh, it's because of you guys that I couldn't make it to the bank. I never keep money around in the house, but last night I just couldn't get to the bank. So I do have all the cash you need. So I got the cash I need. And I just, the way the Lord put all of these together and how he provides. So I got here. Long story short, after I got here, things didn't quite pan out with the people that got me here. I got disowned. And so after a semester of being with them, they kind of disowned me. And so I had nobody, no sponsor, no family. And they got ready to send me back home to India. And that's when God worked with my president of the school. And he said, I truly believe God brought you here for a purpose, Amy. So do you want to finish your studies? And I said, sure. So he said, well, trust God with me and we'll take you back. So I was in California for Christmas break when they decided to disown me. And God brought me back here, and the church in Michigan continued to love and support me for 4.5 years, with God providing, didn't even have a bank account, with God providing every step of the way, with many times exact money I needed in my mailbox, and the church family loving on me and taking care of me. And I have to mention Rick and Cheryl Lerman from Michigan. They were my sponsor, a host family. He sweated, raised money for my support, and did all he could.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the Lord brought my husband into my life, that was kind of like really? I didn't think I was going to get married here because I was going to be done and go to Russia. Remember? I haven't forgotten. So, but it was so clear that was what God wanted. I had prayer warriors. So much prayers to just be sure that this is what God wanted me to do. And so then, yeah, that is a very short story of a very long process.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's an amazing story. And I guess there's so many things going through my mind. It's these kind of stories are actually kind of common in faith, where there's miracle after miracle after miracle. And you had a very specific vision of what you thought you were going to do. God had a very different idea in mind. And it's just classic, right? You said you would never become a pastor's wife. Here you are, a pastor's wife in Kansas. I'm guessing back in India, you had never heard of Hayes, Kansas. There's not a big publishing arm in Hayes, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just amazing to see, just hearing miracle after miracle, how you got here. And I guess, man, Amy, our time's gone fast here. We could probably do 2 or 3 episodes with your story. But one thing I'm just kind of blown away by is, I think because you knew your family's history, right? You knew where your tribe, where your family had come from. I think you had just this heart for missions. I think there's this fire that a lot of us don't have. And I know one thing, again, since I'm a little bit familiar with your story, when you come to America, America is just night and day different from your culture. And I guess one quick story I'd like for you to share, if you don't mind, in your Christian Leader article, you mentioned that your sisters from India came to visit you and they kind of noticed some things had changed in you. I think you
Mhm.
said like your zeal was kind of gone, or I think you quickly noticed that in order to share your faith in America, you just had to live differently than you did in India. I guess, can you share that story? We might have to wrap up here shortly, but I'd love for you to share that story and
Oh,
just
sure.
maybe how your faith and how culture has kind of changed you, and how your faith, it's the same, but it's different, right? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
So growing up, it was easy to share because the world around me did not know Jesus. So
Mm,
every opportunity I have, I just opened my mouth and shared, right?
right.
So you can't just change who you are right away. So when I
Yeah.
got there, I kind of did the same thing. And especially when I started finding out that people inside the church are not necessarily always saved, I started saying it even more. But
Yeah.
one thing I quickly found out was that people get offended very easily.
Mm,
Oh, you're acting like you're all so godly, or, you don't cram these things down people's throat, or,
yeah.
you have to have friendship evangelism. And I remember mourning over that idea twice because I made friendship at my workplace one time. And I knew this lady was totally not a believer,
Mm,
but they said friendship evangelism. So I started being friend. And I'm like, okay, where does the evangelism start? Because
yeah.
now I find myself being completely stifled with the idea that no, I can't just start sharing. I have to be careful. I have to respect. Americans want respect. And
Hmm.
so trying to fit into the mold of how do you weave in this beautiful truth of God's word into people's life became such a mystery to me. I just didn't know the line. I just didn't know how
Yeah.
to do it. And so then when God gave me my husband, he's brilliant and he actually has helped me out in so many ways and even the understanding of God's word. And he's a brilliant teacher. And so my bubble became all Christian bubble. So then
Hmm.
I didn't do much of the evangelism factor because I was always in the bubble.
Sure.
And understanding the amount of false teaching that's around there too,
Yeah.
then make me second guess is if it's what I know completely from scripture. So then
Hmm.
I'm like afraid to even share what I know unless I go study it first. And
Sure.
that just like kind of in so many ways paralyzed me, even though the basic gospel is so simple.
Hmm.
Don't know when to say those things or how to say those things. And so I just resorted to, I'll just do Bible studies inside the church culture and just let's just study God's word together. Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
when my sisters came, they were like, what happened to you? Everything you say, you're like, I got to check it out first. Or you say, let me ask Josh first. Or you say,
Yeah.
no, this is not how it's done here.
Hmm.
And they just didn't see that fire that was unashamed and unafraid.
Hmm.
And I was like, you guys just don't understand it. And I don't argue with them. My same sister who told me to die daily,
Yes. Right.
she was the same voice that said, where is your confidence? And I
Mm,
was it took me the next year to look at what am I afraid of? What are you afraid of, Amy?
mhm.
If you were somebody who was not afraid to put your head on the chopping block,
Mhm.
are you just afraid of little rejection now or a bash on social media? Or what are you
Mhm.
afraid?
Yeah.
And so I started really praying and praying for opportunities. And when we got to Hayes, I was very intentional. Actually, I said, I will work outside of the home, outside of the church,
Mhm.
because make connections. So God opened a venue for me to work at a public school and as a chaplain at a hospital.
Oh, cool.
And I would say being a chaplain at the hospital is my favorite because I can walk in and say, I'm a chaplain. And so they already have this, oh, okay, she's
Yeah.
a woman from, who has the word.
Sure.
So then the next thing would be, I can't do much for you medically, but if you'd like to pray, I can pray or we can
Mhm.
chat. Questions, we can chat.
Yeah.
And God has opened venues where if they say no, I have to respect that. And I said,
Sure.
oh, well, have a great day. I hope you feel better soon. And I walk away. So I
Yeah.
pray before I go. I said, Lord, lead me to the people who will be receptive of your word. And
Mhm.
I have had chance to witness. I have
Mhm.
had led people to the Lord. I have had good Bible conversations, and it has been so wonderful for me. My favorite one being one of them was, oh, well, I'm a Jew. How are you going to pray? I said, well, If you're a Jew, you probably know your Torah. And so then I said, your Torah talks about my Jesus. So, and when I was done, he's like, nobody has ever explained that way to me before.
Wow.
And so I feel like the Lord has opened different kind of doors for me now. And he's good that they may know that he is God, because that's important for everybody. Right.
That's amazing. Gosh, Amy, your story is incredible. I love hearing some of the details I haven't heard before. It's encouraging and it's inspiring. And again, our time has gone really fast. I wish we could talk a lot longer. But I guess I'm just curious, Amy, since you have kind of a unique perspective on Christianity, the American church, maybe, and evangelism, I guess I'm just curious, what lessons have you learned that people listening maybe haven't considered before, or maybe we've heard before, but we haven't really been very good at applying? I love the dying to yourself idea. Would you say, if you kind of had to sum your story into a lesson that we can learn, would you say that's kind of the big overarching theme, or what else do you want to teach us today?
Well, I am myself learning the deep truths I go back to the beginning. I've asked myself this when this thing happened, and I said, if you were asking me that exact question, what would I the answer? And to me, it comes down to that they may know that I am God, because when he introduced himself to Moses to tell the people of Israel, he said, I am that I am. And all those wonders he did, the 10 wonders he did, why did he do it? That they may know that he is God, that Pharaoh that end up knowing, the magicians end up knowing, the Egyptians end up knowing, the Israelites end up knowing that, because when you know God, it establishes one's identity. When you know God, it provokes true worship. When you know who your God is, it empowers one's calling. When you truly know who God is, it encourages a weary pilgrim. It produces meaning and joy in everyday people for everyday lives, and all to the glory of God. He wants to be known for his glory. And when we know him at I think that sometimes when we do Christianity here, going to church and checking off boxes, I love that COVID happened in a very weird way. I love that even our politics is shaken up in a weird way. I think then Christians are now asking, what is the true meaning of life? And I think that's important, because we are God's people and we have to think differently. We have to live differently. The gospel is not some good idea that we're peddling. It has to be changing. It has to mean something that calls us, that beckons us to holiness, that beckons us to fruitful living, that makes a difference to everybody we come in contact, because the gospel changes things and it can change life. And I think I'm very passionate really about that. And, it's a culture where I found myself idolizing comfort too. When we comfort so much, to be a little uncomfortable is also a good thing, because that also instills in us the need to die to myself every day, so that the gospel, that I decrease and he will increase. And I think that is a very important theme that we cannot abandon.
Yeah, no, that's a great word. Okay, my last question, I want to get you out on here on this. Again, your story of wanting to be a doctor in Russia is just stuck in my mind, and your just desire to be a martyr. Like that's so rare, but it's honorable. Like I understand, maybe how things have shifted over your years, but so I guess I'm just curious: is Russia still on your mind? Have you come to a point where Hayes is your mission field now, and you see your students and your patients or whoever you interact with? Is Hayes kind of where you're at, or what's next for you, Amy? Or is this where you're called?
Yeah. Well, as soon as I got married, I was finishing up college, and no, my husband was still in, because we got married early, and he's a little younger than me. That's another one I said, no one younger. We went to a mission conference, and one of the speakers said something that really hit me on the head, and it said, God cannot use you where you're not. You may have a plan to be somewhere, but God cannot use you where you're not.
Yeah.
If he puts you wherever he puts you, that's where he wants to use you. And I don't want to lose the zeal of being sold out for God ever. But I can't, how somebody I've heard another phrase that said, people live such a heaven-bound life that they're no good on earth.
Right.
I don't want to think about a certain place so much that I'm no good here.
Yeah,
But
right.
here, today, in my world, somebody needs encouragement. Somebody needs to see Jesus in a fresh new way, or
Yeah.
somebody needs to hear about Jesus in a fresh new way. So
Mhm.
I think if he opens doors, I would love to go. But I am not so stuck at that anymore because I can ask for things that God says no. And
Mhm.
and I have to be able to accept it too. And I have to die to that dream too.
Yeah.
Because if Russia is dead, then what's the next step? The next step might be the rest of the world. And that's a much bigger mission field, right? So
Yes.
we just don't know.
Sure. Well, I'm sure as you found out, there are plenty of people in Hayes and all your surrounding community. There's a lot of people who need Jesus, right? Wherever you are. So,
Mhm.
gosh, well, Amy, your story is amazing. Like I said, it inspires and encourages me. I'm sure people listening are feeling the same way. So I just thank you for answering God's call and each of those little miracles throughout your journey, and just for what you're doing now. It's just an amazing story of God's faithfulness, and so I'm just
Uh,
grateful that you followed through. It's an amazing story.
mhm. And it's true. I thank you that you say it's God's story that he uses us. Then what an honor to do that. My daughter prayed for me this morning and she said, Mom, just remember it's not your story, it's God's story. And she's right. Ultimately, we are all in God's hands to be used. We are just a pot of clay and he's
Yeah.
using us. He needs us. And it's God's story. And when he does things, he does it with style. So
Well, I appreciate that perspective. Your humility comes through as you share your story, and I'm grateful for that. And speaking of your story, we really, there's a lot more we didn't get to. So I guess people listening, if you aren't familiar with Amy's story, if you go to the Christian Leader website, you can find a couple of articles that Amy wrote that kind of fill in some gaps we didn't have time to get to today. So I encourage you to do that. But Amy, this has been really great. I wish we could talk longer. It's been great getting to know you. Thanks again for sharing with us today. It's been an honor.
thank you so much. Thank you.
C-Link is the online bi-monthly newsletter featuring news and stories from the Christian Leader magazine. C-Link delivers timely news to your email inbox so you can stay up to date with what's happening in our districts, agencies, and partners. Sign up for C-Link today on the Christian Leader website at www.christianleadermag.com.
Once again, as I mentioned there at the end, I'm just so grateful for Amy, and her story really does inspire me. And I can say with some degree of confidence that I think she's the only person I've ever met who dreamt of becoming a martyr in Russia. I'm pretty sure that's the first time I've heard that sentence. So Amy's faith just encouraged me. And, for those of us who have spent most or all of our life in America, I think hearing these stories of what life is like in other parts of the world, and just miracle after miracle that led her to where she is today, it's just encouraging and a good reminder for me how big God is and how he can weave his plans together to get a girl from India to come to the Christian publishing capital of the world in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then get landed in Hayes. And God can work in a lot of pretty amazing ways to get us where he wants us to be. And I'm just really grateful for that reminder today. We also mentioned a couple times that Amy did write out her story for the Christian Leader magazine. So if you would like to check that out and learn even a little bit more about Amy's story, you can go to christianleadermag.com and you can just search for her name, Amy Gelatt, and I think the results will pop up there if you want to read just a little bit more about Amy's story. Okay, well, if you're listening to this the week it comes out, today is Good Friday, and I'm sure many of you in church leadership world are getting ready for many services this weekend, and I'm sure you're praying and preparing for a lot of guests to come. So whatever your role is in all these Easter and Good Friday services, I just hope and pray that you have a really great weekend. I hope that you are able to experience Jesus yourself as you're leading various elements, and that many people in your community will get to hear the good news of Jesus through the work that you're doing in your services. So thank you for the hard work I know that you are doing. It's not in vain. So I hope you have a really great Easter weekend. Thanks again for listening today, and we'll see you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.